Hey everyone, welcome to Informed Dissent, a news podcast that brings you dispatches from the gender culture war. I am the gay, not queer writer, Ben Appel, and I'm here with my co-hosts, Gender Clinic whistleblower and co-executive director of LGB Courage Coalition, Jamie Reed, the always insightful writer and researcher, Eliza Mondegreen, and the brilliant, albeit disenchanted transsexual, Corey Cohn. Lisa Sellen Davis is out today. We're gonna chat about the excruciating last week tonight segment. That's what it's called, right? With John Oliver on trans athletes. We're gonna discuss that. We begrudgingly watched it. But first, I'm gonna read off some headlines from this past week. And as usual, if you guys have anything to fill in after I'm done, please let me know. Also, if you would like a more comprehensive breakdown of the previous week's news, gender-related news, you can subscribe, become a paid subscriber to Informed Dissent, and you will get a weekly news roundup written by me, delivered to you every Friday afternoon. So first, I'll mention, let's see, two Colorado bills passed in the House. They now head to the Senate. They first prohibits health insurance providers from denying gender affirming care, and the second penalizes dead naming and misgendering. And it also mandates courts, to consider trans affirmation in child custody cases. So Colorado is becoming like an island, kind of similar to California in terms of passing laws that enshrine gender affirming care for young people and also now apparently criminalizing or making it a misdemeanor to dead name and misgender. I think the language they use is something about if you do it with the intent of harassment or consistent misgender. I don't know what it is. I don't know how that's going to hold up with the First Amendment. I'm sure it'll get people will sue if it does pass through the Senate, which I think it is scheduled to because the Senate does have a Democratic majority in Colorado, I believe. So we'll see what happens there. The Trump administration is assembling a Title IX investigation team to investigate the quote staggering volume of Title IX complaints. And the investigation team will consist of Department of Education investigators and then attorneys from both the DOE and the Department of Justice. We all know last week a female fencer was disqualified from a competition for refusing to compete against a male. And then that was followed with a female disc golfer refused to compete against a male. There was a video of her forfeiting from a match, if that's what you call those competitions. Um, Maybe this will prompt even more
I don't
women.
know, Ben. John Oliver thinks fencing is just worth laughing at. So
Right.
we don't even need to learn the name of the match. We'll
Yeah.
just
Right. Well, and we will, yes, we'll get to that. And oh, and Senator Ted Cruz, Texas Senator Ted Cruz has opened an investigation into U.S. state fencing over their trans policies. A UK women's pool tournament championship featured two males competing against each other. So the final was between two males in a women's pool tournament.
Equality is
Um,
complete.
what's that?
Equality is complete.
Yes, we've made it. We've made it. The Montana House voted down a bill that would have made it a felony for parents and doctors to help kids under 16 access medical transition. Maine has now sued the Trump administration over the funding freeze for allowing male athletes to participate in women's sports. Meanwhile, the Trump administration has pulled funding. I think the number was like 1.5 million or something from the Maine prison system. So now they pulled funding from the Maine prison system for allowing a trans-identified male who was convicted of the murder of his parents and family dog in 2018, I think it was, to be housed in the women's prison. Um,
He
the,
killed a dog?
his parents and the family dog, yeah. Um, the Illinois school district in which faculty members allegedly forced girls to undress with a male in the locker room recently, that has now been referred to the Department of Justice by the law firm America First Legal. So the firm is urging the DOJ to investigate for state and federal violations. And then lastly, in a 58,000 word decision, an Australian judge, ruled against a mother who had in a custody case she had allowed her son to medically transition, so the father has been entrusted with sole parental responsibility. And Jamie, I think you said that this Australian judge is a well-known judge. This seems to be a consequential decision. Why is that?
It is a consequential decision in that if, okay, for example, imagine you had a custody ruling here in the US where Jack Turbin was the lead witness for the mom, and Jack Turbin was then found to have been misleading the court. So that is essentially what occurred. So in this custody case, one of the leading gender centers in Australia were found to be misleading the court. They were found to not be operating under best practice guidelines or really evidence-based care. The judge did cite and rely on the Cass report a lot. And this is known to be a great judge. This is Justice Strum. And what he did is he ruled the mom wanted to medicalize the kid. The judge awarded custody and medical decision making and all that decision making over to the dad. The issue that I'm hearing from friends in Australia is they see this as a great ruling, but the mainstream media there has not picked it up at all. If any of you follow Bernard, he, I think, has been covering it, but I think
Bernard
one of
Lewis,
it,
right?
Bernard Lane.
Lane,
Bernard
I'm
Lane.
sorry.
Yeah, Gender
Um,
Clinic News.
Hmm.
Yeah, but again, this is one of those where we have a court with a pretty strong blow against the kind of industry, and it's just not getting picked up and covered by their mainstream media.
Got it. That's
It's
really
also
helpful.
it's also just a great ruling. Even if you don't have to read the whole 58,000 words, you can read Bernard's piece. He really breaks out kind of the claims that were made on behalf of the mother and her case for custody and medical decision making, and then how kind of witnesses for the father and the judge really broke those down. And it has there are many interesting like kind of incidental findings that are brought up. So there are things like that, any of us who have observed this for any period of time could have predicted, but like they don't describe the boy being very distressed until puberty blockers are on the table. And he thinks that going through male puberty is optional, and then he's very distressed. And it's just like a very humane ruling. There's a great quote from Maria Montessori about, kind of the mysterious unfolding of childhood and not knowing, how kids are going to change in their minds and their bodies as they grow, and needing to leave the door open to whatever kind of future that child should have. And it was really gratifying to read it. It reminded me a lot of the experience of reading the like initial Kira Bell ruling back in early 2020, where it was like, oh my God, not everybody has lost their minds.
All right. Well, that's good news. Yeah, and so I'll link in the show notes to Bernard Lane's piece for Gender Clinic News. And I think I put that in the newsletter as well. All right. Did I miss anything? I think, there's more, like I said, newsletter if you want more comprehensive overview. If anything else comes up, guys, please throw it out there. Okay, but let's talk about, look, I avoided the John Oliver segment for like 3 days. It was going viral on social media, and I was just like, there's just no way in hell I can watch 42 minutes of that. Um, and then finally I thought, well, I'm gonna write this newsletter, so let me do it for the folks that are subscribing, and I can write about it there and cover it. And then obviously I realized, this is really something that we should talk about, and I think we all agree. Did you struggle? I think we all struggled, right?
I gave it 10 minutes the first time, turned it off. Couldn't, I was angry and kind of disgusted and turned it off and had to come back to it.
What about you, Eliza? I think you said the same thing, right?
Uh, it was painful to get through. I have this I have this bad habit of trying to multitask with yoga, which I realize is not probably how the mindfulness part of yoga is supposed to work.
You try to
I
read
think
John Oliver.
I think
and-
it's just okay. It's not yoga. It's just stretching. But I was
okay.
very
I can understand that. Well,
Yeah,
okay, so let's go through it. It was the entire episode essentially. And it was
it was.
his and so he does show different clips. It was, it wasn't just like, oh, the kind of usual maddening, like, talking points. It was actually blatantly offensive. It was cruel. It was sexist. It was stupid.
No,
It
Yeah.
stupid.
was it was uh it was all of those things. It was all of the things wrapped
Can
into
I
one.
ask though first, did
Mhm.
anybody used to like his show?
Yes, but
Okay.
like the first year or so. But I mean, I had the
Oh,
experience
it's
like
hilarious. It's
I had the experience where it's like, okay, when I was laughing at this, when he was like talking about special districts and like, I don't know, creating a mega church or whatever. One of the things that made it so painful to watch last week tonight, yesterday, in preparation for our podcast, was just like he's being so smug and superior and like just not remotely fair to the topic that he's covering. And it's like, is that what I was laughing at? Like in, I don't know, 2014 or 2015, whenever that was? Maybe.
Corey, for the folks who are just listening, perhaps you should verbalize your head motions.
Corey is nodding his head up and down. He's wearing a blue Nevada sweatshirt.
But you were nodding because you were saying that's what the benefit of watching
That's
John
what it,
Oliver was, is that it makes you
He's
feel
always,
smug and superior.
he's always been like this.
Uh-huh, yeah, absolutely.
There's
But it
a
was about things I didn't know about, so I got to feel like I was being informed, even though maybe that wasn't happening.
Yes,
Here's what I
correct.
want to know. Either from my co-presenters here or from people in the comments. I'd like you to go back and watch something from John Oliver back when you liked John Oliver, even if it's just some clips on YouTube, and then tell me, do you see him with in a different light, or do you think that he has changed? It's
That's a
one of
good
those two things.
That's a good exercise. I think I haven't done that, but I think I probably will see him in a different light because I do see Jon Stewart in a different light. So when I
Mhm.
watch Jon Stewart now, or when I watch old clips of Jon Stewart, I'm filtered through a very different opinion and it's that smugness, it's that superiority, it's that comedic, like everybody else is a moron and I'm just gonna make jokes about them. Um, it's gross. It's gross. But look, let's talk about so what, Oliver started with, totally predictably saying it's a fixation of the right. This is a total, not mentioning any liberals and progressive, not mentioning
Yeah.
anything about how the overwhelming majority, I think it's like 67 in a recent poll or 69% of Democrats are opposed to males and women's sports, obviously much larger among Republicans. Completely ignores that. This is just a complete right-wing issue. He begins there and then he also ends there because what is so aggravating about this, and it also made me aggravated with the speaker Mike Johnson, which is that he ends or nearly ends with a clip of Mike Johnson saying, man cannot be women because the Bible says so, something like that. And the audience laughs predictably.
Mhm.
Oliver says, "Oh yeah, because the Bible says that this, and I'm glad
yeah.
that we know." And it's like everyone's doing a disservice. Speaker Johnson, leave. I respect entirely that you are a Christian and that you are a biblical literalist apparently, and that maybe, and that you take lessons from the Bible and so on. Freedom of religion, totally respect it. But if you're arguing for this stuff that does nothing to strengthen your argument to morons like this, you
Mhm.
are just giving them sound bites and it's like it makes everybody look dumb. Everybody's a loser.
Are
Mike
you sure?
Johnson, yeah, well, Mike Johnson could just say, men cannot become women because people can't change sex because biological sex is real because of all of these things. We don't need the Bible to tell us so. And then two, John Oliver, you know, using this as it's like you're pretty
Yeah.
much just announcing to the world that you think that men can become women, that men can change sex, and that to think otherwise, you're a complete moron.
Allow me to present an alternative viewpoint. So I believe that there are people who heard what he said, because he didn't say it's because it says so in the Bible. I did hear this part of the clip. I think I think another way of framing what he said is that there are literal and spiritual truths, and it is a spiritual truth as well as a literal truth that there are only men and women. There are not the spiritual in between or the spiritual transformed people who have switched from man to woman. So although you have a secular viewpoint now, I know you were raised with a religious viewpoint.
No, I mean,
I,
I can still consider,
yeah,
I'm,
but I think that's I think that's the point that he's making. Not that there's men and women because the Bible says so, but I think he's making the point that there are literal and spiritual truths, and that the concepts that are advanced with gender identity ideology uh, violate both of those sets of truths, the literal and
it's just
spiritual.
not politically expedient. It's not politically expedient.
Yeah,
It's not,
so
it's dumb. It's not a smart
But,
political move.
but the
It's the
secular,
same as the Trump administration using the word gender when he's talking about there are only two genders. No, there are only two sexes. It's the same thing. Leave that out of it.
so
We're
Ben, no,
arguing, you know.
okay. So I think this actually highlights something that we have seen, and probably Corey, you might agree with this. We see this in every single state that we testify in.
Mhm.
So testimony will go on sometimes 4 hours, sometimes eight, and someone will always get up and say, in so many words, I am a Christian, I am a pastor, I am here because the Bible says that there are only two sexes, you can never change your sex. We know that for a long time, whenever I would testify or listen to testimony, there would often be many people testifying from that standpoint. And I struggle because we are a pluralistic society, and I do believe that their viewpoint does matter and their belief system does matter in making policy and law. But at the same time, if I got to build the best strategy, how to win, I would want nobody to bring that up at all because I think you lose the Democrats when you go there. And from Corey's point, now when we hear testimony, it's been super bizarre because in Kansas, for example, the other side had changed the words to popular Christian songs and was singing about the mythical belief of the Jesus baby trans child. And now they're showing up. And so, tactically speaking, I think what Ben is saying is if Johnson didn't go there, then we could rely simply on the science and maybe have a better win against the John Olivers of the world. Is that kind of where you're at, Ben?
Yeah, I mean, I guess so, but then come to think of it, if he wouldn't have said that, then John Oliver would never have used that clip. So it's a move. I mean, my point is kind of moot. It's not like John Oliver would use this alternate clip saying, "Oh, here's Mike Johnson saying that, scientifically it's impossible for one to change their sex." And then if he, put forward this whole thesis that was backed by, evidence, John Oliver's not going to do that. He's going to score those,
Yeah.
cherry picking.
yeah. But it does. And also, if we're going to argue that, I don't want an argument against what is clearly a belief system, and kind of the best argument is this is a belief system, gender ideology or gender identity ideology, this belief system, this dogma that's being enshrined into law that violates our freedom to reject what others believe. We can respect what others believe, but we do not have to believe it ourselves. And it's fighting fire with fire. It's fighting one encroaching belief system with another one. and it's a lose-lose game. And Corey, I don't argue that there isn't a spiritual truth to different, sex differences or whatever. I mean, I'm not saying that there isn't. And I'm still, spiritually, I'm a kind of
Yeah.
spiritually speaking person. But when it comes to how advantageous it is in this situation, it's just not. And we're dealing with another side that is delusional, that's crazy, that puts out 42-minute episodes like John Oliver's that are apparently, I learned, I think you guys might have learned this as well, that his fact checker is a trans-identified male. Is that right? Did you learn that?
Oh, you can hardly tell.
Right. D Brent, I believe. In the picture that I saw online, he's holding a Emmy, so maybe he's an Emmy winner. I'm not sure. He has purple or lavender hair. Um, but yeah, so I don't know.
Okay.
Well, I wanna add one more thing here before we continue,
Okay.
because I think this is maybe a blind spot for us, because probably of the four of us or the five of us, I am politically furthest away from the left, whichever direction I'm in. I believe that we're likely to. This is maybe a callback from the past as well. I believe that when we hear these references like Mike Johnson makes, in the Bible, God made man and woman. I think that we have to pay attention that um, these value statements are there deliberately to rebut value statements that the left makes all of the time. All of the time. And everything on the left is deeply suffused or embedded with value statements. And the ones on the right are easy to identify because they have such deep roots in a Christian or Judeo-Christian theology that we are familiar with. That the value statements that the left makes tend to be secularized, even if they are still in the realm of faith systems like gender identity, or the way that the environmental movement has moved towards more of a metaphysical base as well. So even though the ones on the left are not overtly religious, they are still staking out territory with a value framework. And I think when you're hearing somebody like Mike Johnson say something like, as it says in the Bible, I think that this is a rebuttal, and that actually there's a good reason for people on the right to consciously stake out their values, to try to recapture some of the territory that they've receded from because of some sort of agreement that we're going to be more secular, that the left took advantage of by pulling their value system and under the cover of secular neutral concepts.
Yeah.
Sorry, I'm not articulating it very well, but I see it in my mind.
No, I think you
It makes a lot of
articulated it
sense.
very well. I just don't know what to do with that then. Then I always then want to understand, how do we then, is there a tactic, or is there a way to, do we point out to the left, you're being just as religious but in a different way? Or do we, that's what I don't know.
Well, I don't know the answer, but I'm going to provide something to think about, which is that perhaps the concept of neutrality is much more difficult to realize than it looks on paper. And instead of us pretending that there's neutrality when there's not, maybe there's some benefit to picking a side.
Fair.
Yeah.
So
Well,
I'm
I'll
gonna
tell you, after watching that yesterday, I want to pick a side. That's it's radicalizing. I mean, I'm sorry, watching that radicalized me towards further towards the right, further toward, at least temporarily, at least in that moment, I found myself watching that and thinking, good God, give me an election to vote in right now so I can vote red straight down the ballot. I mean, obviously it's a little hyperbolic, but it does. It's radicalizing.
I
Yeah.
would say, since there's no election to vote in, I would say after I watched that, I wanted to go buy more XXXY
Mm,
gear, wear more t-shirts around the country that say things like save women's sports.
hmm.
Yeah.
I wanted to get a shirt that says "Deport John Oliver."
Yes.
Maybe Jen Say will make one.
I would buy it.
Okay, so I want to ask the $1 million, well, the biggest issue I had with the John Oliver segment
Yeah.
might not have been the one that everyone else had. Okay. Yes, he starts out hating the Republicans, but what he also starts out with is he still supposes that there is something called a trans child.
Yeah.
And I still think that okay, if I'm unraveling the carpet to how we got here, I still think that sports only happens because we started medicalizing kids and we created the trans child. And so the question of sports to me doesn't really exist if we stop medicalizing kids.
That's interesting. I would like to hear you argue with, like, let's say Kim Chasby Jones, like from the Icons about that, because I think she would probably say the reverse. Like the sports issue is the thing that's going to get us out of this.
Yes, I do still. So I think there's a reason why women's sports, if you look at polls really, really well, meaning like most people will say, no, men shouldn't be in women's sports because it's such a simple concept. Should a boy or a man participate in women's sports? But I still don't think we would be having that conversation if we never transitioned children, because I think that it's pretty damn clear any male that goes through puberty should not be participating in women's sports. It's because we started to transition some as children that the question started becoming, oh, maybe it could be fair. Maybe they could participate.
But I'm not, so I wish Lisa were here because I know that she's spent probably the most time in the most different historical archives. But I mean, there definitely were men who identify as women, and like Renee Richards in the 70s, the tennis player. I mean, I think that it did predate child transition. So I think that while child transition provides if you're really fucked up, a much stronger argument because you can be like, no, 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 they didn't go through puberty. They didn't go through male puberty. I think it was already an issue.
I agree. I mean, it did complicate it. It does make the argument more nuanced, I guess, the issue more nuanced, for the crazies. But look, when we're talking about, and I hear what you're saying, Jamie, but when we're talking
Yeah.
about okay, it's kind of common sense that, males who have gone through puberty, people understand that there's this natural advantage, but there's still, even John Oliver, the only allowance that he made consistently throughout it was at the elite level. Now, I understand that there can be a debate at the elite level, but when he's talking about high school sports, when he's talking about anything, and high school sports, boys have gone or are going through puberty or have gone through puberty. At the very least, they've commenced it and likely have completed puberty, by their junior, senior year. So there is that benefit and that issue and that, and people feel very strongly about high school male athletes being able to compete in female sports. I would say well, from what I see, nearly as passionately as when they're talking about like middle school, when they're talking about kids. I mean, there are so many. I think maybe that has to do too with the fact that young people and young women are kind of led to believe that they shouldn't be objecting to these things, or that this is okay, or that if they're going to be kind and good people, that they should accept this. Um, but I, it's definitely complicated it, but I think that, yeah.
Yeah.
But there, what's interesting too is that I think this segment is like such a great case study. Like it's such a great illustration of how, this kind of propaganda works, and all of these different techniques that one uses,
Hmm.
these tools, these, because like even at the beginning, these subtle, like he even makes a subtle plug for censorship, you know? It's like he claims that, you know, it's the GOP spending on trans ads and messaging that's actually what's convincing people to think that this is an issue. That people
Yeah.
are being like brainwashed by quote unquote anti-trans messaging and hate speech, rather than, just using their common sense and their rational minds, which is a plug for censorship. It's a plug for we need to be more vigilant about policing this kind of speech and policing this kind of language, because it is actually working to convince people to hate trans people. Subtle little things like that. He gets through these different arguments, and then at one point he says, "Okay, now I've gotten to this. I've mentioned this, and this. So now I've proved that um, I, I've made the argument. I've proved my point. So now let's move on. Like now you're
Hmm.
all with me.
Hmm.
Now we've gotten all that settled. So I know I've convinced you. Let's move on." And again, it's a tool. It made me think of, and I think about this all the time. There was this tweet in maybe 2020, and I can't even remember who it was. Listeners maybe can help me. I'll put it in the show notes. It's someone had tweeted, an influential person had tweeted, something like criticizing identity politics is racist, or something like that. Like saying you're opposed to identity politics is racism. And then it said, repeat that in your head until it sinks in. Repeat it as many times as you can in your head until it sinks in. Of course, it got like a gazillion likes, right, on Twitter at the time. But I look at that and I think, what the F is this? Like repeating it's this trans women are women, trans men are men. These dogmas, repeat them until they sink in. And it's like, it's that same tactic, it's that same move to, and that's why the importance of language. I mean, if anything, like talk about radicalizing, I'm like, oh my God, I am never I'm not using preferred pronouns, I'm only using sex-based pro. I mean, when he says, uh in our post-election show, I said, quote, there are vanishingly few trans girls competing in high school sports anywhere. And even if there were more, trans kids, like all kids, vary in athletic ability, and there's no evidence that they pose any threat to safety or fairness. And then he says, um, trans kids are going to injure kids just like all kids are going to injure other kids. When he's saying these things, he's saying boys are going to injure girls just like uh,
Hmm.
girls are going to injure girls when they're playing sports. That's what you're saying. You're saying that males are just going to injure women, and that we should all just deal with it. He goes on and on about how there's never been a case of an athlete, an instantaneous switch where an elite athlete goes from competing with men to then competing with women. And it's like, what about Leah Thomas? Leah Thomas took off
Right.
a year from swimming at the elite in college and then comes back. What does John Oliver think happens during this magical transition period? That this transubstantiation of like, does he literally think that Leah Thomas, or that there is a reasonable amount of time in which a male can become a female, like, or adequately female enough to compete against women? I mean,
There's a good fake answer to that, Ben.
what is that? What's the good faith answer?
Well, although the research is wrong, it was nevertheless propagated
Right.
that when a man has his testosterone production squelched, zeroed out, that his performance levels drop. And it was propagated, it was wrong, but propagated that when those performance levels drop for so long a period, that they become uh, like that of a woman's performance levels. Now I'm going to say it's wrong a third time. Nevertheless, somebody will probably want to try to correct me. I know that it's not correct,
But I would love to
but
just,
it was propagated. That idea
yeah,
was propagated. That is such a beautiful cow.
Yeah.
really, really beautiful. But it's like, it's just, I don't, what, the fact that otherwise seemingly intelligent people can believe these things
Well,
and that,
but
or can that trust that they're true and
wait, wait,
trust,
wait. It's a fact-based claim. So your belief should be informed by a fact, something that you can measure and observe repeatedly. So this shouldn't be a feeling about whether it's true or not. It should be something that's demonstrated factually.
right?
So our objections to men competing with women, among them, are not just the the claims about men having more access or opportunity. The claims are relate to the safety of women and relate to whether there are performance differences. And if those two things were zeroed out, if let's say for some reason that men became even more frail and weak than women, they don't. We know that they don't. But let's say for the sake of argument that that did happen, so that men were at even higher risk competing against women, and that men were even like confirmed weaker than women in women's sports, then the arguments for preventing them from competing would be it would be an uphill climb.
Guess who makes that argument in this segment?
Yeah,
This trans sports scientist in John
yeah,
Oliver's segment
right. I
Yeah.
makes
understand.
this argument and comes on screen and says, it's undoubtedly true that trans women will maintain some advantage in sports, not so much in endurance sports.
Yeah,
Okay,
Joanna
what?
Hart.
Yeah, Joanna Harper. But in size and strength sports, trans women will also have some physiological disadvantages. Our larger frames are now being powered by reduced muscle mass and reduced aerobic capacity. And that can lead to disadvantages in terms of quickness, recovery, endurance, things that maybe aren't quite as obvious as being bigger and stronger. Like it's by now we're heaving around more weight and this is putting us at the same in the same playing field. Go ahead, Jane.
Okay, I was never a college athlete, but I was an athlete all through high school. I was a soccer player. I played team sports. I played volleyball, basketball, softball, soccer, swim team. I was huge. I loved all of it. And call this controversial if you want. I don't care if a transitioned male has a less advantage, even if I could now beat them up on the field, I still believe that I should have the right to women's only sport,
1,000,000%.
regardless of if I'm going to be not injured, if there's a safety question or not a safety question. There is a level of camaraderie, bonding, and and this competitive spirit that I gained from women's sports. I gained confidence and leadership skills, things that things that I would not have been able to have if I was in either co-ed sports or if there were trans identified males on my team. And it's hard to like explain in scientific terms what those things are, but there is something about competitive sport that gave me really that gifts that I rely on to this day that I didn't even know I was earning while I was participating in those things. That I just think girls have the right to have, even if it's not at the elite level, even if they'll never be at the elite level.
Yeah.
I agree. Um, let me try to. I feel like my point was lost, and what you
No,
said is super valuable. So I want to hit this again just really quick, and then acknowledge that further. The people who support men playing in women's sports, like the thing that you said, is the thing that they really have to take on. So all of these arguments about the physical parts, because that's where about half of these arguments are coming from. People who are misinformed and think that the matter should be settled on the physical things and not the parts that you were just talking about are not necessarily dumb people. They have the incorrect facts and they have different values. What you just talked about makes perfect sense. And I think that this is where what you talked about has a fairness component, but not in the competitive sense. It's more in the opportunity sense. What you talked about is in terms of being able to develop human development is critical, but it's not also not the part on the physical playing field part.
yeah.
So everything that you said is where the heart of the argument is. And when we're having the argument about values, we can dispense with all of the physical competition part in a sense, and just try to make that's a cat butt there. We like focus on the parts that you talked about. Like we should be able to pull the argument into that direction.
You're right. You're right. That's a really good point, Corey, and you're right about that. And Jamie, that's a really good point that you brought up. I'm getting bogged down in arguing, but it's like why can't you see? Why can't you understand this? And it's like there are also really valid and legitimate arguments that are being ignored, like Jamie's argument, like the fact that women, girls in women's sports, Title IX, all of these things have been put into place because women have historically been denied the opportunities that men have had. Girls have historically been denied the opportunities that boys have had. And that was the most frustrating thing about that. That was the most grotesque part of this segment to me. And I'm glad that you said that because this is where I had the most visceral reactions each time. It wasn't about the um you need to run, Jamie? Okay, I'm sorry.
Yeah, but I'm gonna miss you all.
Okay.
I'm gonna go get in a U-Haul now.
Okay. You big
Safe
lesbian.
travels.
I know.
Is it being towed by a Subaru?
Uh, I'm
Yes.
not answering any of the rest
Okay.
of these questions.
All right.
It's the big lesbian U-Haul day, and I'm going.
Okay.
I will see you all
Okay.
next.
Thanks, Jamie.
Safe
Bye.
travels.
The that was the most grotesque part about it was it wasn't about him, trying to downplay. I guess the maddening part, the frustrating part is him downplaying sex differences, the reality of sex differences. Yes, but we've gone over that a million times and you're right. Like that is what most of these arguments end up being about, but he actually touches upon the fairness for women and girls issue and
Mhm.
scoffs at it. He scoffs at this, and that was the most viscerally disgusting part. He brings up a clip of a trans-identified athlete saying, I, played on the men's team or the women's softball team, and everybody's saying that I should play on the boys baseball team, maybe people should focus on the fact that the boys baseball teams have these beautiful fields and the girls softball team has this horrible field that always gets flooded. And it's like, and so then it goes back to Oliver, and he's like, yeah, like, why are people worried about, a trans girl playing with girls? They should be worrying about, and it's like, that is the actual point. Girls sports, girls have been historically and are historically underfunded, and they have historically been denied these opportunities that boys have gotten. So yes, you're right. We actually should do both. We should have make sure so that girls continue that these opportunities are specifically and exclusively for them, and work so that their softball fields aren't getting flooded out and that they have quality playing conditions that are just as quality as the boys. Talking about how, oh, Riley Gaines is complaining because she tied for fifth place with Leah Thomas down to the hundredth of a second, and they made her, hold the sixth place trophy and gave Leah Thomas the fifth place trophy. Well, you can't even see what it says on the trophy. You can't see that one says fifth and one says sixth. Why should she even care? That's a heinous, disgusting, despicable thing to say. And for her, she shows a clip of her, and for her saying, I felt belittled, I felt ignored, belittled. And he laughs. He gets the audience to laugh at this video of this girl saying this. Does he include any clips about how, like when she went on Megyn Kelly and said we had to undress in front of these men, and that was the first time that I even knew that I was competing against a man was when I hear a man's voice in the locker room? I mean, no, we hear nothing about that. He laughed about Peyton McNabb. He says people are overplaying the hand. They're overplaying the story of Peyton McNabb getting a concussion in volleyball after being hit by a ball that was hit by a male because she went on to play softball later. That they're really overplaying this. It's
And because the volleyball
disgusting.
player wasn't even that good. Like, it was like, okay.
Well, that was the San Jose State. Then another woman comes on and says, a female athlete at San Jose State says, I feel unsafe playing against a male, and this is unfair." And John Oliver says, "Your team's 119th in the country." And the audience goes, like, what's the big, you're really not all that. That's
Yeah.
disgusting. It is disgusting, disgusting, disgusting. And yeah, hashtag deport John Oliver. I think he's a US citizen, but seriously, I would, now I'm being hyperbolic here, but I almost want to say that I would suspend the Constitution just so that could happen because it was repulsive. And the fact that this audience was clapping like seals for these things,
Yeah.
is, and the fact that I can tweet about this and then some gay guy comes up in my comments and says, "Oh, I thought made a pretty nuanced argument. I thought that it was pretty." Please, someone else talk.
Okay, so that's what people think being nuanced means, I guess. I think it was one of the funniest points when I first heard it, and then one of the more chilling points when I thought about it was John Oliver was like, you can say anything about trans people as long as you add in sports at the end. And he's like, you can say things like, I don't believe trans women are women in sports. And it reminded me of the Chase Strangio tweet that was like, it's like you don't even believe that trans girls are girls. And it's like, well, yeah, like that's actually the whole point. And it's weird that like, are you not getting it? Are you pretending you're not getting it? I don't know what's happening. But the thing that is a little bit sinister when John Oliver does that is, he says at one point in the episode, maybe there are some reasonable conversations to have about elite athletes. Maybe if in the future there was some proof that like trans women had an advantage in sports, then maybe we could like revisit it and talk about it. Maybe there's a discussion at some point. But then he's also saying, if you are carving out sports and saying there's something different about this, or there's something, a gender identity claim that can be drawn into question in any arena at all, that is like this slippery slope and you shouldn't get on it and you shouldn't go there. And like, you should just, trans women are women in sports. It's great. It was like, don't start thinking about it. That's really what it felt like. And then there was the whole and I think Freddie DeBoer, I couldn't read his whole piece because it was behind a paywall, but Freddie DeBoer not really thinking things all the way through with trans stuff, probably because of some family connections. One of those people who's unable to apply things that he knows about every other kind of like internet mediated adolescent mental health condition to what everybody else knows about trans stuff. He was like, John Oliver's part of the problem because he's not persuading people. And he's like, if we think that this, like, Democrats are losing on this issue, so either we have to prioritize it and say, okay, maybe this isn't a really, like, it would suck if we think that this is what progress looks like and we kind of have to put it on the back burner because, you know, nobody supports it. But like the thing that you definitely don't do is mock people and pretend that there's no basis for concern. Like you have to persuade people. And I will try to take Corey up on the assignment to go and listen to a really old episode of Last Week Tonight and see if that was ever happening.
So Freddie DeBoer was saying that there is an argument to be made for this, but he's doing it poorly.
He's saying that the approach of mocking instead of even trying to persuade people who don't agree is not going to work. And you just can't do that when you have an issue where he points out, 45% of Democrats don't support male athletes in female sports. Like this is an uphill battle. You can't just, caricature and make fun of people.
Isn't it like 67%?
I think it is higher than what he cited.
It changes.
It changes, right? You're
right.
It
changes based on how we ask it and whether people understand the question and when we ask it.
You're right.
Yeah, but in any case, he cited probably the most favorable numbers
for his argument. Right.
Yeah.
What did you go ahead, Corey?
To the extent that he can help peak people, good for him. If he's picking up the banner that Leah Thomas dropped, and he's just gonna keep running and peaking more people, God bless him.
Well, that's what I tweeted. I said, if this would have aired right before the election, Trump would have won California and New York. Now, of course, that's a joke, but that's all I could think. I could think, holy hell, talk about peaking people. Yeah, I mean, you're right. You know what? Maybe thank you, John Oliver. Thank you for doing that. Thank you for it's worth all of the gray hairs that I got. It's worth all of the new space of hatred that I have in my heart for you.
Wow.
For peaking more individuals on this asinine issue. What did you think?
Freddie DeBoer actually says, it would be, it's not completely inconceivable or something like that, but John Oliver could be like a Heritage Foundation plant just because he is exactly the stereotype of the self-righteous, smug, progressive that vast majority of the country has a serious allergic reaction to being exposed to.
No.
Spoiler alert. I mean, that's exactly what I said in the newsletter. I said that I'm left wondering if he's a covert GOP operative, because of how blatantly. Liza, what did you think about his argument when he got to the point where he was doing the impression of what girls do in bathrooms?
I was just thinking about that. The girls in the bathrooms gassing each other up. Well, I guess I want to say that I hope that he has never been in a woman's bathroom, but it doesn't seem like he probably has. Maybe people are having this experience, but I don't think that's why we have women's bathrooms. And
what do you think he was trying to say with that when he says, everybody knows that when girls go into a bathroom, one says, "Oh, I love your lipstick. Oh, I love oh, this is your hair. Oh, it's amazing. Oh, da da da," and goes through this whole monologue impersonating kind of Valley Girl ideal of a girl. What do you think he was trying to say?
I mean, he's trying to say that he's basically trying to make it a very unserious claim that women would ever need this kind of space for themselves, because that's all we're doing with it. We're just gassing each other up and being, airheads, complimentary airheads. Because he can't talk about the reasons that women actually do need separate spaces. Like, okay, we've seen enough, bathrooms and changing rooms and things turn gender neutral, that like sexual assaults have gone up, voyeurism have gone up, things that, you know, women don't want to be subjected to, that we're much more at risk when men are allowed in. He doesn't really want to talk about, you know, the differences in women's bodily function and why we might not want men around. It was just very typical of the way that he approaches the whole subject, where it's like, make the most dismissive possible case for the opposition, where it's just like the most ridiculous, the most trivial, make fun of it, pretend that was the whole thing, laughter, move on.
I suspected it was like he was doing that. I wondered if he was doing that gaffe to say like this is what conservatives are trying to do. They're trying to enforce this idea of the woman as this stereotype of a woman that they don't. It's almost like that argument that you hear from crazy people when they're like, "Oh, you just have such a backwards notion and idea of what a woman should be," and
Mm-hmm.
because your idea of woman doesn't include men, then you are actually regressive and you are thinking of a woman as a 50s housewife. And it's
Right.
like, no, you are the ones that are relying on these regressive stereotypes by suggesting that a male can be a woman if he gets fake breasts, takes some estrogen,
Yep.
and puts on a skirt, you know,
Yep.
that women are
If he
defined
can
by
talk
these
about hair
things.
for 20 minutes,
Right.
he's in.
So when it's that argument, when it's like, oh gosh, they're so opposed to, of course there are going to be people on the right that are opposed to gender nonconformity in general and men not being, the prototypical men and women not being, the prototype or stereotypical women. But um, you know, that's what's so maddening about this whole thing, about this polarization of it and this pretending like this is a right left issue because people put these ideas into these boxes and think that everybody is opposed, thinks this, and this,
Yeah.
Um, mm, awful.
Yeah.
But before we run, can I drop an anecdote?
Yes,
Yes.
please.
So 2 weeks ago or so, I had the opportunity to deliver some remarks before the Nevada uh, Intercollegiate Athletics Association, NIAA, the group that sets the rules for how schools can who can how school sports are played, right?
Yeah.
And they are revisiting some guidance that they had issued last decade that permits boys to play in girls' sports under some circumstances. And they have a conflict because the Nevada Constitution explicitly protects gender identity. So in my remarks, I raised the point that in order to protect the rights in Nevada that are established on the basis of gender identity, males should be given as much protection as possible to play in their biological sex category. The boys who are gender diverse should not be picked on or abused or bullied or excluded or not permitted any sort of participation from playing on boys' sports. And that perhaps the commission is not doing enough so that boys that are identify as girls have those opportunities to play with other members of their sex.
And were you did you do this live or via
Yeah, it was virtual.
virtual? Did you see anybody's responses or
No,
hear anybody? Okay.
I was
It's a
concentrating
strong
on.
argument.
Well, I heard afterwards that lit off a number of uh, bulbs going, oh, yeah, actually, we can make these things fit together. The girly boys cannot be picked on or treated badly in boys' sports, otherwise their rights are being violated.
Yeah.
Hmm.
Maybe that'll
Men,
be the
you
next
need
lesson.
we need more men to step up and try to solve this. Coaches and other male athletes. I'm really disappointed that there's no high school male athlete who's going to watch Informed Dissent, probably,
Probably not.
but maybe the mother or father of such an athlete will watch the segment and will say, come here and just check out this part.
Well, but the thing is I don't think we have to even have to convince the male athletes. It's the female high school athletes that we unfortunately have to convince about this stuff
No,
because
no, no. I know what you're saying. I know what you're saying, but let me finish my point.
go ahead.
Boys male athletes, high school athletes, need to be able to reach out to boys who are trying to play in women's sports and say, I want you to join us. I want you to try out on our team. I want you to be with us. You are welcome. You are included here
Okay,
because
right.
we are the same sex. However you identify, we are the same sex. And I want you to be with us, where we will still respect you and play with you as an equal teammate, so that the girls can go have their sports in a fair and safe way.
Yeah.
More boys could be doing that.
Okay. I see what you're saying, and I agree.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Come
Shall
on,
we
lads.
do
I said, come on, lads.
Shall we do our non-gender things?
Yes, please. What do you got?
Somebody else has to go first. I don't know.
Mine was the White Lotus finale,
Okay.
and it was specifically the scene where the woman who was on that show, The Leftovers, gives her speech at the table with her two friends about how she feels that there's something sacred about their friendship, even when they're just talking about asinine things. And she feels honored to be sitting at the table. And it was just such a poignant scene. I cried. I recorded it. I watched it again, cried again. I texted my friend about it. She's like, "Oh my God, my favorite scene was that one part." I cried. I said, "Oh my God, so did I." Um, that is my shout out. I wanted to post it on because I recorded it. I wanted to post it on X, but I was like, I don't know what copywriting is with all this
Mhm.
stuff. I don't want to get in trouble for that. But then I see these clips going around of these shows, and I'm like, I guess that's okay. I don't know. Okay, what do you
Yeah.
guys got?
Corey.
Well, I don't think this is quite gender related. It sort of is, but not gender identity related. Did either of you see that clip of Kemi Badenoch, the conservative leader,
No.
I read about it. Not watching Adolescence.
not watching Adolescence? This is mind-boggling. So there's these two hosts of a BBC show who are just excoriating this extremely competent political leader for not having watched a drama series on Netflix. And every time she's like, I don't need to watch Netflix to know these issues. There's a huge rape cover up
Yeah.
that the government just yesterday decided not to investigate any further.
Yeah.
Like, there are things in reality that I'm paying attention to. I don't have time to watch Netflix. And the host keeps saying, well, this documentary is really affecting. And she's like, it's not even a documentary. It's not
Right.
real. And these BBC hosts are just like, I don't know what's wrong at this point in history, but I feel like I just forgot the name of it. The show about the man he realizes that he's trapped in a novel with Will Ferrell. Anyway,
Stranger
I
Than
feel like
Fiction.
Stranger Than Fiction. I feel like I am in that circumstance because there's no way that a political leader gets excoriated for not having watched a Netflix series, and that this is also real life.
Julie Bindel, who we probably all know, the feminist writer, activist,
Mhm.
she tweeted, she said, I demand to know what Kemi thinks of Godfather 2.
How is this serious? Like, we'll never do anything serious if this is how if this is the discourse. Nothing serious will ever be decided.
Yeah.
Good point.
All right, we've bought you some time, Eliza.
Yeah.
Okay, I'm just gonna have to go with a book, which is not gender related because the author doesn't probably want to go there, but you can draw some conclusions. Suzanne O'Sullivan, who is an NHS neurologist, she's written a couple of great books in the past about psychosomatic illnesses, and she has a new book called The Age of Diagnosis. And so she's exploring kind of the implications of taking on a diagnostic label as an identity, the implications of kind of genetic testing and other things that purport to tell you things about your future and how that might shape your life, whether you end up, developing such and such condition or not. It's really fascinating. She's a wonderful writer, and really recommend it.
How's your book writing going?
Not really great.
It's a slog.
It's
I
a
mean,
slog.
I know. Yeah.
Yeah, I just have so much material, and I'm trying to figure out how to reorganize the section about like what's going on with young people, because I kind of have to set it up as like, all right, here's the theory, which is something's wrong. You figure out what it is. You embark on this difficult journey to address it, and then you become your true self. And then you have to back up and be like, okay, but maybe what is, let's be more descriptive about what's actually happening and how it doesn't really look like that. But yeah, I think I'm on my fourth or fifth document of like, okay, but this time I'm just going to start from the top and reorganize everything that I already have. And I haven't done that much writing. So not really great. But
I empathize. I really do.
Yeah.
All right, folks. Well, thank you for listening. And I apologize if I got really heated. I think I did. I think this was a big, like, Ben's complaining and going off again.
It was really infuriating.
It was. Please subscribe to the newsletter, and then everyone have a wonderful week, wonderful weekend, and we'll see you all next week.
Okay.